Hi, I'm Janine. This is KUCI 88.9 FM in Irvine, and this is Get the Funk Out. Standing by to join me is Multi-Emmy-nominated TV host, author, speaker, and social entrepreneur, Philippe Cousteau. And I'm really excited to have him on the show. We're going to talk about his latest release for young readers, The Endangereds. Welcome to the show.
Delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
How did the idea for this book come about?
Well, 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to meet with an extraordinary executive editor at HarperCollins, a guy named David Linker. And we were chatting about some ideas around telling stories of environmental significance to young people and how to do that and just kicking around some concepts. My background is in education and conservation with a focus on youth. As really what I believe are not just the leaders of tomorrow, but the leaders of today for driving hope and environmental action forward. And so that manifests itself through both my conservation work at Earth Echo International. We do a lot of classroom programs and after-school programs with kids all over the world, documentaries on television. But I also wanted to do something in the fiction space because I also feel that sometimes we can tell certain truths and we can really get people excited in a way through fiction that we can't through nonfiction. And so we started talking about the crisis that's facing our planet today with respect to the amount of endangered species that we have in the world, the fact that this planet loses somewhere around 1,000 to 1,500 species every year to extinction. And how could we tell that story in a fun, engaging way for young people that would make them feel like they had an active role as participants in helping to solve that problem. And this book, The Endangereds, was the result.
So give me a little backstory of how you got to where you are now, because people know you from your grandfather, Jacques Cousteau. What was it like, growing up? Give me a sense of that.
Probably a lot more normal than most people would expect. My grandfather, as you said, was Jacques Cousteau. He was a world famous explorer and environmental advocate, filmmaker, writer, etc. In fact, 76 years ago is when my grandfather first set foot into a little river outside of Paris to test his aqualung invention, this ability, this device that would allow humans to swim freely for extended periods of time underwater, what we know today is scuba diving, that he co-invented. And so it's really only been 76 years since our exploration of the ocean, and he was really a pioneer of that. And then my father, Philippe Sr., joined him throughout the 60s and 70s and producing dozens of documentaries and being a world-renowned explorer in his own right. Unfortunately, he passed away tragically in an airplane accident 6 months before I was born. So my mother, who was raised in Redondo Beach, we moved back to LA, and I was born here in Los Angeles. And so my life growing up was, again, probably a lot more normal than most people would expect. We saw my grandfather several times a year, but I didn't grow up on expedition and traveling all over the world like many people assume. Would have if my father had still been alive, but didn't get that opportunity. Nevertheless, I grew up with my father's films, my grandfather's films, and my grandfather's stories. And like I said, we spent a good amount of time with him every year. And that had a huge influence on me. And so growing up, when I was 16 years old, I got an opportunity finally to go on an expedition and to Papua New Guinea and see remote tribes up in the highlands and spend weeks diving and doing research in Milne Bay with a world-renowned oceanographer and an extraordinary pioneering woman, Dr. Eugenie Clark. And that's when it was all the films and all the stories that I'd heard clicked with the reality of being able to go on these adventures. And I realized this is the kind of work I want to do for the rest of my life.
Amazing. I feel like it's in you genetically in some way.
It does feel that way sometimes. I just can't imagine doing anything else. But I will say that it's such a wonderful privilege to be able to. And my grandfather always said this, when you have the opportunity to travel and to see the world and do these extraordinary things, you also have a responsibility to share it with people and not keep it to yourself. And it's really been the mantra and the guiding mantra of 3 generations of my family has been to pursue these adventures and to pursue the exploration of the world But that with that knowledge comes a responsibility both to fight for the protection of that world, but also to share our journeys and share that inspiration with others.
Sure. Now, how long have you been host of Exploration Awesome Planet?
So Awesome Planet, just 6 years, 6 seasons, I guess.
Okay.
A little bit more than 6 years now. Things were on a little bit on delay with COVID, as you can imagine. But
Right.
6th season just premiered a week and a half ago. So we had our second episode last Saturday. And it's a syndicated show. It airs in pretty much every household across the country, typically on local Fox stations in most places, but sometimes local NBC or local, CBS, etc. That is also on Amazon Prime, but it's a lot of fun. It's been a show that we've been all over the world with it, and it's still really popular.
That's amazing. Tell me about how you decided to target this younger audience for the book.
So, the great thing I believe about youth is that it truly is the beacon of hope for the future. There's a lot of bad news in the world today, and I spend a considerable amount of my time through my nonprofit Earth Echo International that we started 15 years ago, working in education with youth around the world. And it is truly the antidote to the bad news, is walking into any classroom or auditorium of a elementary, middle, high school, anywhere in the world, and seeing the optimism and the hope and the determination on the faces of young people. And so recognizing the power that young people have to change the world, not just when they get older, but today, having seen it with my own eyes, young people who've helped pass laws, 12, 13, 14 years old, at
Right.
9, 8 years old, that have transformed their communities and gotten whole towns to ban single-use plastics through campaigns that they've come up with and launched themselves at 8, 9 years old. Projects that have seen young people protect vast swaths of land, raise incredible sums of money. Young people are so powerful today and can drive so much change. We certainly saw a groundswell of young people that helped to have a considerable influence on the winner of the presidential election that just happened here in the United States.
Yes.
And certainly helped to elevate climate change as one of the main primary issues that helped propel that win. And I think that the focus for us has been recognizing the power of young people and zeroing in on enabling and fostering that power. And a book like The Endangereds is one way to do that. In particular, focusing on that middle age reading level, 8 to 13 years old, which the book targets. That's an age that is just beginning, I think, to recognize their potential and their influence. Has such a passion for animals as a general rule, and is an age that is formative. Mm-hmm. And we really wanted to do this book, create this wonderful, exciting adventure of a motley crew of endangered species. We have a pangolin, a polar bear, an orangutan, and a narwhal, who band together when they're rescued from the wild and brought to a secret facility in the Galapagos, where they're given this special serum that gives them hyper intelligence, unbeknown to their human rescuers, and it allows them secretly to go on these missions to fly airplanes and hack satellites all over the world to rescue endangered species. And so it's this wonderful, amazing book, and it's gotten terrific reviews, and kids love it. But it's also teaching them something. All the backstories of the animals are rooted in real issues. At the end of the book, there's real information about these animals and ways that kids can help support them.
Good.
We have a partnership with World Wildlife Fund and other organizations. We're doing live webinars with real researchers in the field. Last week, we had a researcher from Nigeria who rescues pangolins, and I'm doing a live Zoom webinar, and we've got a bunch of classrooms and kids all over the world participating. And he's got a little pangolin like hanging out on his shoulder.
What is a pangolin? I need to know.
Yeah, of course. So we chose a pangolin. So polar bears, orangutans, these are animals that most people know. So the pangolin, actually, let's see here.
Is it a penguin and a something?
But Wangari.
Okay.
Here's the cover of the book, but Wangari isn't in it. So let me find a little illustration. Pangolins are like, basically, they kind of remind people of armadillos. They're similar in size. They're these animals, a mammal that lives in Asia, and here she is skydiving. But they have an armor plating. They are the most heavily trafficked in the illegal wildlife trade animal in the world.
Whoa.
Pangolins are really extraordinary creatures. And however, it's believed that their scales all have medicinal qualities. And so hundreds of thousands, 100,000 or more pangolins, probably more every year, are killed.
That's awful.
For their scales
Okay.
in soup, predominantly, destined for China, Singapore, places like that. Of course, their scales, just like rhino horn, are keratin, which is the same thing that our hair and our fingernails are made out of. So it's complete nonsense. Nevertheless, these animals are being decimated for
That's
this
so sad.
historical, belief.
Senseless. Makes no sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we put a pangolin in the story, and we were talking to a researcher in Nigeria with a little pangolin on his shoulder last week. So we're doing lots of different things around the book to help kids engage and be part of the solution.
And you're teaching about these different breeds of animals, and it's great. Yeah. Did you have a say in which animals were chosen?
Yeah, it was, we sat down and David and I and my co-author Austin, and we just talked through different kinds of animals that we're passionate about, and that we thought could represent the different challenges that animals are facing. So for example, the polar bear, as the Arctic shrinks, polar bears there's less sea ice, which is where they hunt on sea ice. And so polar bears are suffering because of overfishing, and also changes in the Arctic and habitat loss, and changes in the ocean. Narwhals and other oceanic creatures are suffering because of the illegal wildlife trade. Animals like pangolins are disappearing because of the illegal pet trade and deforestation. Animals like orangutans are suffering. So we wanted to take some iconic orangutan and polar bear, and some less well-known black-footed ferrets, who are also heroes in the first book, and pangolins, and mix them all together to create a dynamic group of characters, both known and perhaps lesser known.
When's the animated series coming out?
We are already having those conversations. Right. So it definitely had an eye to the idea of creating something that could be an animated show for kids.
Yeah. Are you finding that the quarantine has been challenging, however it's allowed you to kind of pivot in a different way?
Yes, I'm a big believer. I was just on a staff call earlier about our annual planning, and as we always remind, we have a mantra at Earth Echo that there's no problems, only solutions, and no challenges, only opportunities. And for us, both the silver lining to this has been that we've been home with our 16-month-old daughter. Who's going to be 17 months coming up here soon. So that's been a wonderful privilege, because I certainly would have been traveling a lot if it wasn't for that. But also in this terrible time, and the amount of suffering out there is unimaginable. I know so many people right now are suffering because of this pandemic. And I think, however, it is also a reminder. This is a zoonotic disease. This is a disease that came out of nature, and it came directly because human beings were encroaching and destroying wildlife. That's why coronavirus exists.
Okay, yes. Let me ask you that. Let me ask you that, because I've heard so many different versions of it. Came from this, came from that. Did it come from a bat in Wuhan?
Well, it's possible. Now, the thing is, typically bats don't transfer directly to humans. It's hard for viruses to jump from bats into people directly. It's very, very possible, likely, in fact, that it had some sort of an intermediary, perhaps a wild pig, something like that. But that these animals in these wildlife, in these wet markets, are all packed together. You have wild animals, semi-wild animals, some more domestic animals, chickens, all packed together. And so the potential for disease transfer in these situations is enormous, whereas in the wild, it's not. Yes. And so, regardless of whether it came from bats, some speculation that actually may have jumped into pangolins before it jumped into people.
That's what I heard. I did hear maybe that's
speaking of pangolins. But there's, we don't know. We likely never will know 100%.
Sure.
What we do know, what is crystal clear, is that this pandemic came from our destruction, our encroachment into nature. It came from a wild animal. It has cost our global economy 10, 15, 20 trillion dollars once it's all said and done.
Yeah.
And it's estimated that to prevent these kinds of pandemics in the future, in order to protect this wildlife and stop this kind of encroachment, it would cost us somewhere around $100 billion a year. Okay, $100 billion, 10 or 20 trillion dollars.
Trillion, yeah.
So I think this is also a reminder of the price that we pay as we continue to destroy what's left of nature. And this is something that scientists have been warning about for decades, and we have ignored. There just so happens to be another crisis that we've been ignoring for decades that scientists have been warning about, the climate crisis, and we've ignored that at our own peril. So I hope people are able to connect the dots here, that inaction is far more costly in the long run than action now. And I think that's really, the idea that and one of the core concepts of the Endangereds is that things are out of balance, but that if we work together, that we can restore balance. And that's really the underlying message.
Sure. Anything else you'd like people to know about the book?
Just that it's a lot of fun. I think, we target a lot of reluctant readers. I think a lot of kids are at home right now. Right. For parents that want something for their kids to be able to look at and read and get engaged in. It's the first in a series. We're already well underway in book 2. Good. And I don't know if you could hear my little girl in the background. Did. She just started walking, so she's very excited about that. Look out. Fundamentally, the last thing I'll say is my daughter is 16 months old, almost 17 months. And in the last 40 years, we've lost half the biodiversity on this planet. And so all of us have to take a good long look in the mirror and question what kind of a world and who gave us the right to diminish it and pass on such a diminished world to our children. Sure. And when we talk about biodiversity, it's not just about talking about animals and fish and pangolins and polar bears. All of these ecosystems keep us alive and are vital to the web of life that we rely upon for food and shelter and security and stability and sustainability. Right. Anyway, that's the message, and I appreciate you having me on. Fantastic. And where can people find the book? So you can find everything about the Endangereds that you need at www.theendangereds.com. Okay. Links to webinars that we're running for the rest of the month. Links to classroom resources, adoption kits with World Wildlife Fund, and other ways that you can connect with Earth Echo and help support endangered species. Fantastic. I hear somebody paging you. I know, she's hungry for lunch. I apologize. It's fine. This has been great. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me. If you need anything else at all, please don't hesitate. Okay, sounds good. Right. Wonderful meeting you. Take care. You too. Bye. Bye-bye.